The bullies' biggest mistake. They had no idea the new girl was a wrestling champion. Ashley Carter stood at the entrance of Westfield High School, her massive frame filling the doorway as she clutched her worn backpack straps. At 17 and weighing over 200 kilograms, she knew the stairs were inevitable. Her dark hair hung in loose waves around her round face, and her brown eyes darted nervously across the sea of unfamiliar faces in the crowded hallway. The oversized black hoodie and loose jeans did little to hide her size, but they provided some comfort as she navigated her first day at yet another new school. Ashley had transferred from 3 different schools in the past 2 years, each move prompted by her father's military assignments. This time, they had settled in suburban Phoenix, and she desperately hoped Westfield would be different. Her mother had assured her that things would improve, that she just needed to give it time. But Ashley had heard those words before. She understood the cruel mathematics of high school hierarchy. She was an easy target, and bullies always found their prey. The morning classes passed in a blur of introductions and uncomfortable silences. Teachers stumbled over her name, classmates whispered behind cupped hands, and Ashley felt the familiar weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. By lunchtime, her stomach churned with anxiety rather than hunger, but she forced herself to enter the cafeteria. The massive room buzzed with conversation and laughter. Hundreds of students clustered around tables in their established social groups. Ashley grabbed a tray and selected a modest salad, acutely aware that every food choice would be scrutinized and judged. She had learned this lesson painfully at her previous schools. Fat girl eating pizza meant mockery. Fat girl eating salad meant more mockery for being fake healthy. There was no winning scenario. She spotted an empty table near the back corner and began making her way across the room, carefully avoiding eye contact with the groups of students she passed. "Holy shit! Look at that whale!" A voice cut through the ambient noise, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Ashley's steps faltered, her grip tightening on her tray. She recognized the voice belonged to Tyler Morrison, a lean boy with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confident smirk that screamed trouble. He sat surrounded by his crew, Jake Patterson, a stocky football player with cruel eyes, and Marcus Webb, tall and lanky, with a face full of acne that he compensated for with vicious humor. "Dude, she's gonna break that chair," Jake added, his voice carrying across the cafeteria. Several students turned to watch, some giggling nervously, others looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. Ashley felt her cheeks burn with humiliation as she continued toward the empty table, each step feeling like a walk through a gauntlet. "Hey, new girl," Tyler called out, standing up from his table. "You sure you need that food? Maybe try the gym instead." His friends erupted in laughter, and Ashley heard phones being pulled out, the distinct sound of camera apps opening. Her worst nightmare was becoming reality. Not only was she being humiliated, but it was being recorded for social media immortality. Ashley reached her table and sat down heavily, the metal chair creaking under her weight. She stared at her salad, her appetite completely gone, but forced herself to take small bites. She had learned that not eating would only provide more ammunition for her tormentors. Around her, the cafeteria slowly returned to its normal volume, but she could still feel eyes on her, whispers following in her wake. What none of these students knew was that Ashley Carter carried a secret that would have shocked them into silence. Hidden beneath the layers of fat and the oversized clothes was the body of a champion wrestler. For 8 years, from age 9 to 17, Ashley had dominated the wrestling mats in 3 different states. Her size, which made her a target for bullies, was actually her greatest strength in the wrestling ring. She had competed in heavyweight divisions against boys and girls alike, her technique refined through countless hours of training with her father, a former Olympic wrestler himself. Ashley's father, Miguel Carter, had been a bronze medalist in the 1996 Olympics before joining the military. He had taught his daughter that wrestling was about leverage, technique, and mental strength as much as physical power. Ashley's low center of gravity, incredible core strength, and natural athletic ability hidden beneath her bulk had made her nearly unbeatable in competition. Her signature move, a devastating hip toss that could slam opponents twice her size to the mat, had earned her the nickname Earthquake in wrestling circles. But Ashley had made a promise to herself when they moved to Phoenix. She wanted to try being normal, to see if she could navigate high school without fighting, without the reputation that followed her wrestling achievements. She was tired of being known only for her athletic ability, tired of the assumption that because she could wrestle, she should solve every problem with violence. So she had asked her parents not to mention her wrestling background to the school, and she had quietly packed away her medals and trophies. The harassment continued throughout the week. Tyler, Jake, and Marcus seemed to take particular pleasure in making Ashley's life miserable. They would accidentally bump into her in the hallways, causing her to drop her books. They left crude drawings on her locker depicting whales and elephants. During gym class, when Ashley was forced to change in the locker room, they would make loud mooing sounds whenever she passed by. The physical education teacher, Coach Henderson, was a middle-aged man more interested in his sports teams than dealing with classroom management. When Ashley tried to approach him about the harassment, he brushed off her concerns with a dismissive, "Kids will be kids. Maybe if you lost some weight, you wouldn't be such an easy target." His words stung worse than the students' taunts because they came from an adult who should have protected her. Ashley's breaking point came on a Friday afternoon in the gymnasium. The class was playing dodgeball, a cruel game that Ashley had learned to dread at every school. Coach Henderson divided the class into teams, and predictably, Ashley was picked last. Tyler made sure he was on the opposing team, his eyes gleaming with anticipation as he hefted a rubber ball in his hands. "Time to go whale hunting," Tyler announced to his teammates, loud enough for Ashley to hear. The game began, and Ashley tried to stay on the periphery, avoiding the flying balls, while her teammates were eliminated one by one. Soon, she found herself alone on her side of the court, facing Tyler, Jake, Marcus, and 3 other students. "Nowhere to hide now, fatty," Jake taunted, bouncing his ball menacingly. The rest of the class had stopped their own games to watch, sensing that something dramatic was about to unfold. Coach Henderson was nowhere to be seen, having stepped out to take a phone call. Instead of throwing the balls to eliminate Ashley from the game, the boys began targeting her with deliberate cruelty. They threw the balls as hard as they could, aiming for her stomach, her chest, her face. Each impact brought laughter from the surrounding students and jeers from her attackers. Ashley tried to dodge, but her size made her an easy target, and the confined space of the gymnasium gave her nowhere to run. "Dance, piggy, dance!" Marcus shouted as he whipped a ball at Ashley's legs, causing her to stumble. The group of boys had formed a semicircle around her, trapping her against the gymnasium wall. Tears of humiliation and rage ran down Ashley's face as ball after ball struck her body. The pain was nothing compared to the emotional trauma of being treated like an animal in front of her entire class. "Please stop," Ashley whispered, her voice barely audible over the laughter and taunts. But her pleas only seemed to encourage them. Tyler grabbed 2 balls and began throwing them in rapid succession, each one finding its mark on Ashley's torso. "What's wrong, Whale? Can't take it," Tyler sneered, preparing to throw another ball directly at Ashley's face. In that moment, something inside Ashley snapped. 8 years of wrestling training, 8 years of channeling her anger and frustration into athletic excellence, 8 years of being taught that she was strong and capable, all of it came flooding back. "That's enough," Ashley said, her voice carrying across the gymnasium with the authority that made several students stop laughing. Tyler, however, was too caught up in his moment of power to notice the change in her tone. He wound up and threw the ball with all his strength, aiming directly for Ashley's head. What happened next would become legend at Westfield High School. Ashley's wrestler instincts took over, and she caught the ball with one massive hand, her fingers wrapping around it like a vice. The gymnasium fell silent, the only sound the echo of Tyler's shocked gasp. Ashley squeezed the rubber ball until it deformed in her grip, then let it drop to the floor. "My turn," Ashley said quietly, but her voice carried to every corner of the gym. She began walking toward Tyler, each step deliberate and purposeful. Her posture had completely changed. Gone was the hunched, defensive stance of the bullied victim, replaced by the confident gait of a predator who had just identified her prey. Tyler backed away, suddenly realizing that he might have made a terrible mistake. "Stay back, freak," he stammered, but his voice cracked with fear. Ashley's transformation was complete. Where moments before had stood a cowering victim, now approached someone who radiated danger and control. Ashley lunged forward with the speed and precision of a trained athlete. Before Tyler could react, she had grabbed him by his shirt collar and the waistband of his gym shorts. Using a perfectly executed hip toss, she lifted all 160 pounds of Tyler Morrison into the air and slammed him down onto the gymnasium floor with such force that the impact echoed through the building. Tyler landed hard on his back, the air rushing out of his lungs in a painful wheeze. He lay there gasping like a fish, his face turning red as he struggled to breathe. The students watching let out a collective gasp of shock and disbelief. Jake and Marcus stood frozen, their mouths hanging open as they processed what they had just witnessed. "Holy shit," someone whispered from the crowd of onlookers. Ashley stood over Tyler's prone form, not even breathing hard despite the physical exertion. Years of conditioning had prepared her body for much more strenuous activity than tossing around a lightweight bully. Jake was the first to recover from his shock, and his reaction was pure rage. "You fat bitch," he screamed, charging at Ashley with his fists raised. But Ashley had been expecting this. As Jake threw a wild haymaker at her face, she ducked under his arm with surprising agility and wrapped her massive arms around his waist. Ashley executed a textbook double-leg takedown, driving Jake backward and slamming him to the floor beside his still gasping friend. Before Jake could recover, Ashley had transitioned to a dominant position, her knee pressed against his chest and her hand wrapped around his throat, not choking him, but making it clear that she could if she chose to. "You want to call me names?" Ashley asked conversationally, her voice calm, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Let's see how tough you are when you can't breathe." She applied just enough pressure to make Jake panic, his eyes widening with fear as he clawed at her hand. Marcus had watched his two friends get demolished in a matter of seconds, and every instinct told him to run. But pride and the watching crowd of students forced him to act. He grabbed one of the dodgeballs from the floor and charged at Ashley, intending to strike her in the head while she was distracted with Jake. Ashley saw him coming in her peripheral vision. Without releasing her hold on Jake, she reached out with her free hand and caught Marcus by the ankle as he approached. A simple twist of her wrist sent him crashing to the ground, his legs tangling together as he fell face first onto the gymnasium floor. The three bullies lay on the floor around Ashley like fallen warriors, each nursing their injuries and struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Tyler had finally managed to catch his breath, but remained flat on his back, afraid to move. Jake was making small whimpering sounds as Ashley maintained her grip on his throat. Marcus was bleeding from his nose where it had struck the floor, dark drops staining the polished wood. The gymnasium was completely silent except for the heavy breathing of the four combatants. 24 students stood transfixed, their phones out, recording every moment of Ashley's transformation from victim to victor. This footage would spread through the school like wildfire, shared on every social media platform, and messaged to every student who hadn't witnessed the event firsthand. Ashley slowly stood up, releasing Jake, who immediately curled into a fetal position and began crying. She looked down at the three boys who had made her life hell for an entire week, and for the first time since arriving at Westfield High School, She felt truly at peace. "Let me explain something to you," Ashley said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent gymnasium. "My name is Ashley Carter. For 8 years, I was the Arizona State Wrestling Champion in my weight class. I've competed against college wrestlers. I've thrown boys twice your size across wrestling mats in 3 different states." She began walking around the fallen bullies, her footsteps echoing ominously in the silence. "I moved here hoping I could just be a normal student. I didn't want to be known as the girl who solved problems with violence. I wanted to make friends, get good grades, maybe even go to prom without being a joke." Ashley stopped and looked directly at Tyler, who flinched under her gaze. "But you couldn't leave me alone, could you? You had to push and push until you found out what happens when you corner someone who's been holding back." Tyler tried to speak, but only managed a weak croak. Ashley continued her speech, addressing not just the 3 bullies, but the entire crowd of watching students. "I want everyone here to understand something. I'm not a victim anymore. I tried being quiet. I tried ignoring you. I tried being invisible. But that's over now." She gestured to the 3 boys on the floor. "These 3 learned today that actions have consequences. They thought my size made me weak, but they were wrong. My size makes me strong. My training makes me dangerous, and your cruelty has made me angry." Ashley walked over to where Tyler's phone had fallen during the altercation. She picked it up and held it high enough for everyone to see before deliberately dropping it. The device shattered against the gymnasium floor, plastic and glass scattering across the wood. "If I see any videos of me in locker rooms, if I hear any more whale jokes, if anyone thinks they can treat me like an animal," Ashley said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "they'll find out that elephants are one of the most dangerous animals in the world when provoked." Coach Henderson chose that moment to return to the gymnasium, walking through the doors to find 3 of his students on the floor and Ashley Carter standing over them like an avenging angel. The crowd of watching students quickly dispersed, suddenly very interested in their shoes or the ceiling tiles. "What the hell happened here?" Coach Henderson demanded, looking around at the scene of destruction. Tyler, Jake, and Marcus struggled to their feet, all 3 sporting various injuries and expressions of shell shock. "We were playing dodgeball, and there was an accident," Ashley said calmly, meeting the coach's eyes without flinching. "These boys fell down." Her tone made it clear that anyone who contradicted this version of events would face consequences. Coach Henderson looked skeptical, but the alternative explanation that the fat new girl had single-handedly beaten up 3 of his students seemed impossible to believe. "Everyone hit the showers," he said finally. "Game over." As the students filed out of the gymnasium, Ashley noticed something that would have been unthinkable just an hour earlier. Students were moving out of her way, not because they were disgusted by her size, but because they respected her strength. Whispered conversations followed in her wake, but the tone was entirely different now. "Did you see how fast she moved? Holy shit, Tyler never saw it coming. I heard she's some kind of wrestling champion. Remind me never to piss her off." The transformation in the school's social dynamics was immediate and dramatic. By Monday morning, Ashley Carter was no longer the fat new girl who could be picked on without consequence. She was the girl who had destroyed 3 bullies in front of witnesses, and everyone wanted to know her story. During lunch, instead of sitting alone at the back corner table, Ashley found herself surrounded by curious students asking about her wrestling background. She discovered that several of her classmates were actually impressed by her athletic achievements, something that had never happened at her previous schools. Tyler, Jake, and Marcus kept their distance, nursing both their physical injuries and their wounded pride. The video footage from the gymnasium incident had indeed spread throughout the school, but rather than showing Ashley in a negative light, it had made her something of a folk hero. Students who had been bullied themselves saw her as their champion, someone who had finally stood up to the tormentors who made school miserable for so many. The three former bullies found themselves in an uncomfortable position. They couldn't retaliate against Ashley without risking another public humiliation, but their reputation as tough guys had been thoroughly destroyed. Other students who had previously feared them now looked at them with a mixture of pity and amusement. 2 weeks after the gymnasium incident, Tyler Morrison approached Ashley at her locker. His usual cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like humility. His friends were nowhere to be seen. Their little group had fractured after their defeat, each boy dealing with the aftermath in his own way. "Ashley," Tyler said quietly, waiting for her to acknowledge him. She turned to face him, and he took an involuntary step backward. Even though she wasn't threatening him, the memory of being slammed to the gymnasium floor was still fresh in his mind. "What do you want, Tyler?" Ashley asked, her tone neutral but wary. "I wanted to apologize," he said, the words clearly difficult for him to speak. "What we did to you was wrong. I was being an asshole, and I'm sorry." Ashley studied his face, looking for signs of deception or sarcasm, but found none. Tyler Morrison, the boy who had made her first week at Westfield High School a living hell, was genuinely trying to make amends. "Why now?" Ashley asked. "Because you're afraid of me." Tyler considered his answer carefully. "Yeah, partly," he admitted, "but also because I realized something. You could have really hurt us that day. You could have broken bones, sent us to the hospital, but you didn't. You just stopped us, and then you let us get up and walk away." Ashley was surprised by his insight. It was true. She had held back during the fight, using just enough force to neutralize the threat without causing permanent damage. Her wrestling training had taught her control as much as technique. "I'm not a bully, Tyler," Ashley said finally. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be left alone." "I know that now," Tyler replied. "Look, I can't take back the things I said or did, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and it won't happen again." Ashley nodded, accepting his apology without enthusiasm, but without hostility either. She watched Tyler walk away, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and felt something she hadn't expected: pity. She remembered what it felt like to be humiliated in front of her peers, and despite everything he had done to her, she couldn't help but feel sympathy for his current situation. The remainder of Ashley's senior year at Westfield High School passed without incident. She joined the wrestling team, finally embracing the part of herself she had tried to hide. Under her leadership, the team had their best season in years, and Ashley's reputation evolved from the girl who beat up the bullies to the wrestling champion who happened to beat up some bullies. She made genuine friends among her teammates and other students who appreciated her for her intelligence, humor, and athletic ability, rather than judging her solely on her appearance. The confidence she gained from standing up to her tormentors spread to other areas of her life, and she found herself speaking up in class, joining clubs, and even attending school dances. On graduation day, as Ashley walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The girl who had walked into Westfield High School 8 months earlier, shoulders hunched with shame and fear, was gone forever. In her place stood a young woman who understood her own strength and wasn't afraid to use it when necessary. Ashley Carter had learned that sometimes the only way to stop being a victim is to refuse to be one. She had discovered that true strength isn't about avoiding conflict, but about choosing your battles wisely and fighting for what's right. Most importantly, she had proven to herself and everyone around her that being different doesn't make you weak. It makes you unique, and sometimes that uniqueness is exactly what the world needs. As she left Westfield High School for the last time, Ashley carried with her not just a diploma, but the knowledge that she would never again allow anyone to make her feel less than she was. The bullies had picked on the wrong girl, and in doing so, they had unleashed a force they never could have imagined. Ashley Carter was no longer hiding. She was ready to take on the world.